As AI reshapes the modern workplace, educators are being challenged to rethink how they prepare the next generation to navigate a world of constant change. At Seattle's University Child Development School, better known as UCDS, the focus isn't on competing with technology. It's on developing the skills that make us most human: critical thinking, adaptability, and collaboration.
Is this everybody? Hey, awesome. Are you all ready? I think we have to think about it as a tool. I think as we're getting teachers and students to understand what a tool is and how it supports us within our learning.
At UCDS, the lesson isn't just how to use AI, it's learning when a tool helps and when human judgment still matters most.
Do you remember we talked about our battery?
In Ben Chickadell's design and tech classroom.
So we know our battery is going to give us power to our power piece.
The idea comes to life in simple, hands-on ways.
Do you remember, what do output, does anybody remember? What's that output?
Using electricity to show kindergartners how one action can set off a chain reaction.
If I push one down, is that a chain reaction?
No.
No. What do I need? I need more. So
the goal is not to hand students the answer, but to help them better ask questions, stay curious.
Is it in the right place?
Because the small one cannot hit it.
And think through what happens next.
Because the long one can just touch it.
Should we try it? Right here, is this what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. They're gonna start to decide, hey, if I press this, what happens, right? First starting that exploratory notion. Oh, this happens. It's not working the way I want it to be. How can I get it to work the way I want it to? What we can focus in on right now is continuing to build those human skills of critical thinking, reflection, collaboration with each other to really start to support their future.
Chickadell's research, together with Ayesha Dangle from the University of Washington, found children are already thinking about AI in surprising ways.
And those 5th graders were starting to express AI could be very supportive in their role in learning. They found it as a coach. They also started to find out, well, wait, if I'm relying on this tool too much, if I'm just having it do the work, this could be detrimental to my future.
I'm curious because some groups are setting their blocks up a little differently. I wonder if that will make a difference or not.
And in the classroom, for teachers, that means asking the right questions.
Can I press it? Yeah.
And staying flexible.
Whoa!
Did it work that time?
Yeah.
So we have to find out what's going on to them. We have to be able to respond to their needs. You can't do that with AI in the moment, right? As you're working with kids. You really need to be nimble.
It makes me kind of wonder why that might have happened. Do you have any theories?
And at the center of all of it is keeping the human part of learning front and center.
With human thought, right, and discourse and critical thinking, we can start to erase some of those like fears and worries about, is this cheating? Is this wrong? Whoa, look what happens when Stella turns it.
It moves.
We start with human and we end with human.
Joining us now here in the studio is Dr. Vin Gupta, practicing pulmonologist and public health expert, also senior medical analyst for MS Now. It's great to have you in-house.
Yeah, thanks for having me in the house.
Okay, so AI is such a big deal in our life now. And so as we see kids using it more and more and more, what are the benefits, especially when they're that little?
You know, I think getting unstuck, and when used well, artificial intelligence can be a helpful tool, even at a young age. But I mean, we've had this conversation, Joyce. I think we're learning as we're growing. We're learning as these tools are now available to us. I know we're doing this same exact thing in medicine and in medical school. Every part of society is learning how to leverage these powerful tools. I'm glad at least UCDS and their graduate school are thinking about it. What are best practices in early childhood education? Because otherwise what's going to happen is going to be a void and a gap that might go filled without any accountability.
And I love their approach that they look at AI as one of the many tools in your toolbox that you could use, but it doesn't really replace the critical thinking piece. So we know AI can enhance, as we just saw, the critical thinking piece of it, but does it risk replacing it at all in your mind? I know parents would worry about that.
I worry about the same thing again across society, but I love their approach. And what we saw there was a microcosm of what's happening across education, but human first, human last, various tools like in-person socialization, critical thinking, complex collaboration, but again, that socialization piece is critical. And then yes, of course, you have artificial intelligence tools available there to help get unstuck, potentially ask better questions, to advance your thinking. And so I think that's the approach here, is can it augment our approach? I think about the same thing in the four walls of a hospital, Joyce. Is it going to, what happens if there's a grid failure? What's going to happen with the next generation of physicians? Will we not know how to diagnose? Or are we going to use these tools to help augment and reduce, say, misdiagnosis? And I think that's the goal.
That's a scary thought.
It is
to think that if AI went down, that doctors may not be able to diagnose because they're so reliant on that. Something to think about.
Well, I think
that's a different
skill,
story.
Skill attrition, right?
Right,
and I mean, beginning at a young age. But again, I think that's the reason why UCDS, they have a graduate school that is teaching teachers, frankly, early in their career, what's the best way to leverage these tools to make sure that they're augmenting their classrooms appropriately, not contributing to skill attrition.
From a health perspective, what are concerns if kids start to rely on it too much in their homework, in their daily work?
You were just saying this, the last thing we want is more device time and more sort of pulls towards devices and blue light, which suppresses melatonin, which means sleepless nights. We don't want more devices in the bedroom, kids on devices, before they go to sleep or constantly doing their homework. And so this is where parents have to set guardrails. I think same rules apply. I think parents need to get familiar too with how does an artificial intelligence tool help augment doing homework at night. I think we're learning that as a family. I think all families that we're surrounded with are learning the same thing. But of course, we don't want to increase device time because that's poor sleep. It actually might mean decreased socialization. We don't want that because we know that actually wrestling with a problem, asking tough questions, the struggle actually is really important to cognitive skill development, executive functioning.
So what about the worry that kids might become too dependent, students in general, all the way up through grad school, might become too dependent on the use of AI? Is that a valid concern?
Oh, I think that's a huge concern. And that's something that, if we're not having these conversations right now, if UCDS is not experimenting with it, much like other parts of society, we're not going to know what descaling looks like. And I think that's really what you're getting at here is, are we creating the next generation of individuals that are so reliant on artificial intelligence tools that there becomes this dependency? And again, I think that's where there has to be guardrails for use. That's why that human first, human last component is so critical.
It was interesting in some of the studies that Ben Chickadell did with his partner. The kids, fifth graders, were worried about perception of cheating, or if they weren't going to learn as much as they should in college, or would it impact their grades, et cetera. Are there mental health risks?
Well, again, I think if we drive, one of the most important things for developing young brains is socialization and interaction and curiosity. The last thing we want is in any way for these technologies to cause us to silo, to be more alone, to not interact, to not ask tough questions, and not to struggle. And so I think what Ben was pointing out makes a lot of sense. Frankly, I was encouraged, Joyce, that they have such awareness at the fifth grade level to be asking questions about whether or not they felt like they were cheating or taking a shortcut. That is such healthy awareness.
The warnings are sort of ingrained.
Absolutely.
If it feels bad, it probably is bad.
So, or at least you need to have guardrails, absolutely.
What would be the advice you might have for families who want to strike a balance between this fantastic new technology that is here to stay and making sure that kids learn and use collaboration, critical thinking, adaptation?
Well, I think the concern more broadly, it's not AI as being the health concern, it's balance being the health concern here. Are we striking the right balance? And so as with everything in life, whether it's the food pyramid that you and I have talked about, whether it's the next thing, we need to strike a balance. I do worry that our society is talking about AI in every phase of life, all the time, 24/7, that we're going to lose a sense of moderation. I do love the fact that, again, schools that are modeling best practices help then parents understand what they should be doing and modeling at home. When it comes to, again, helping them think through essays or homework. And so it would be helpful to have a guide, and it would be also helpful to have a national conversation. I don't think we're having that. We're having community-based conversations. Luckily, we live in the city of Seattle, where these conversations are normed. But Joyce, let's be honest, we're not having this conversation at scale.
Right.
And that worries me, what's happening in other zip codes across the country.
And I also think just because we can have it in every aspect of life doesn't mean that we should.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you. We're going to have to leave it there. Will you please come back
Absolutely.
in studio?
Always.
It's always so great to have you, Dr. Van Gucht. A
Thank you,
pleasure.
Joyce.